Election Yard is here today. We need to talk about some primaries going on in 2025. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, the presidential election was last year, the midterms are next year. What the hell is going on this year? Well, I'll tell you what. There are gubernatorial elections in 2 states, but one of those states also has statewide races for lieutenant governor and attorney general. Those states, of course, are Virginia and New Jersey. They will elect new governors in 2025. Neither governor can run for re-election, so each of those states will have a new governor by the end of this year. So first off, we'll point out the primary dates. New Jersey will vote in its state primary on June 10th. Virginia will vote in its state primary on June 17th, so they're a week apart. Even though New Jersey's is chronologically first, we're going to talk about Virginia first because guess what? This website is headquartered in the Commonwealth of Virginia, so this is one that I think maybe we know a little bit about. So Virginia's primary, as I mentioned, is on June 17th. Let's start with the race for governor. This, of course, is the seat currently held by Republican Glenn Youngkin. He flipped the seat from blue to red in 2021. Virginia governors are the only governors in the United States who are limited to 1 term. However, they can run for non-consecutive terms if they so choose, which means you could see Youngkin back in 2029 or any other previous former governor for that matter. But in the here and now, Youngkin cannot run again. This seat is up for grabs. So the big issue here that I think we all in Virginia sense developing, more specific than just the economy, is the issue of the federal workforce and the Trump administration's crusade to shrink it. If it turns out that this is a ticking time bomb issue for the Republicans, it will pop here in Virginia first. This is a state with a lot of federal employees, and as these policies continue to go forward, it's going to affect Virginia very, very deeply. So this is the one to watch. And in that race for governor, let's talk about the candidates. There are just 2 of them from the major parties. There's Abigail Spanberger, former congresswoman from the 7th District. She is the Democratic nominee. She ran unopposed. The Republican nominee is Winsome Earl Sears. She is the lieutenant governor of the state. A few Republicans had tried to get into the race against her, but they did not qualify for the ballot, so both of them were nominated unopposed. And yes, this means that Virginia will elect its first female governor in 2025, just a question of who it is. So there are not many polls in this race since we can't talk about the primary because there is no primary. So let's focus on the general election for a minute. There are very few polls in this race. What polls we've had, they've all had Spanberger ahead, but there have been varying margins and a wide variety of undecideds. Some polls have been closer to 0 and some have been well into the double digits. So the truth is somewhere in the middle of all of those polls. The Republicans were at first privately worried about Winsome Earl Sears, that she could tank in this campaign. Those worries are starting to become a little more public. I've seen more than one news article about this in the last month or so, that Republicans are worried that she's perhaps not the best candidate that they could have nominated, but we'll just have to see how it goes because neither candidate has really revved up their campaigns yet. I can tell you that in my part of Virginia, there's not a lot of advertising going on. There's some YouTube ads that you'll see. You'll see a billboard here or there. You don't see any lawn signs yet. So this campaign really has not taken off. So I think we should wait to see what happens when it does and when you start getting some more reputable polling firms polling in the Commonwealth here to see what's actually going on. Of course, Spanberger is running as more of a moderate Democrat. Sears is definitely considered a conservative Republican. Now, before we move on to the next race, let's talk a little bit about the campaign finance data. So all campaign finance data that we're going to source here in this video is provided by vpap.org, vpap.org. So it tells quite the story. Spanberger is running laps around Sears right now in the fundraising department. To date, Spanberger has raised about $16 million for the race, and she still has about $11 million on hand, whereas Sears has only raised about $5.7 million. So she's out raising Sears by about a 3-to-1 margin at this point. And a lot of that money for Spanberger is unspent. So I think when the campaign really starts going, that's where that advantage for Spanberger is really going to kick in. There is a long way for Spanberger to go in this race, but I do get the sense that she's probably in the lead. If the election were held today, she'd probably win. I can't really venture a guess at this point because polling has been so sporadic. Can't really venture a guess as to how much she'd win by, but I do think she'd win. But we'll see how it goes between now and November. Democrats are definitely hoping to generate some coattails here. There's no two ways about it. There's other statewide races. There's the House of Delegates. Now, keep in mind, the Virginia Senate is not up for election this year. It's up every 4 years, and it was up 2 years ago. So the Virginia Senate is not up this time. The House of Delegates is. Now, the Virginia State Senate is held by Democrats, which means if they can hold the House of Delegates and Spanberger wins, then Spanberger could have a trifecta, which is both houses of the legislature and then the governorship, whereas the Republicans can't if Sears wins and they flip the House of Delegates because they're going to have a Democratic Senate for the next 2 years anyway. So let's talk about the race for lieutenant governor. This one's definitely more interesting because it actually has one on one side. Now, the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor, we know who that is. It's John Reed. He's a host on the radio station WRVA up in Richmond. And he's never held elective office before, but he was at one point the comms director for George Allen, who was a U.S. senator, and he was governor of the state at one point. Even though Reed has been acclaimed the Republican nominee, that does not mean that his race so far has been all sunshine and roses. He definitely got into a little bit of hot water. He's still in the race. He got into some bad press. He was accused of posting some adult content on Tumblr, which, I understand lots of people used to do that back in the day. Glenn Youngkin wanted him off the ticket, but then Reed refused to leave, claiming he was being discriminated against for being gay. So at the end of the day, what ended up happening was Youngkin backed down. Reed is still on the ticket, but it sounds like Sears and Reed are going to be running their own races, which, in Virginia, of course, they don't run on a ticket like they do in New Jersey. We'll talk about that in a minute. Reed is kind of off on his own at this point. Then you turn to the Democratic side, and you can see there were a lot more candidates on this side. There are 6 Democrats running. Let's talk about them. So we put at the top LeVar Stoney, the mayor of Richmond, who is probably the front runner. Probably. This is the kind of race where the candidate who wins could get less than 30% of the vote. That's just how fragmented the field is. But he definitely has more name recognition than most of the candidates in this race. Then you've got Aaron Rouse. He's a state senator from Virginia Beach. He actually played in the NFL, so he's got some recognition as well. Then you've got Ghazala Hashmi. She's a state senator from the Richmond area. She's the only female in this race. Then you've got Babur Latif. He is the school board chairman up in Prince William County. Alex Bastani, who is an attorney, and also Victor Salgado, who is an attorney. Now, all candidates, really the first that I had seen of them was in a TV debate on May 22nd. All 6 of them participated. And as you might expect, all of them, or most of them anyway, declared victory after that debate. So in this one, yes, Stoney might win this primary based on his name recognition and his electoral position. Being mayor of Richmond, it counts for something. But you know what? When you look at the endorsements in the Democratic field, most of them are not going to Stoney. Most of them are going to Aaron Rouse, and most of them are going to Hashmi. So I think that's interesting, maybe showing that some of the establishment of the Democratic Party is going other places other than him, but that doesn't mean that Stoney won't win. So we will see what happens on June 17th. In terms of polling, there's really not much that we can pull out of what we've seen so far. Some of the polls that I have seen on this lieutenant governor's primary have had upwards of 60% undecided. So, that's just such a high percentage that you can't even draw conclusions out of those numbers. My general sense, though, is that this race is going to follow the governorship. In other words, if the Democrats win the governorship, they will probably win this one, whereas if Sears wins, they will probably have won this one as well. We're just going to have to see. There's virtually no reliable polling out there right now about this. And then the race for attorney general. So Virginia directly elects its attorney general, and that is currently Jason Miyares, a Republican. He is running unopposed in the GOP primary. Out of all of the statewide races we're talking about between Virginia and New Jersey, he is the only incumbent running for re-election. So Miyares is there, and there is a two-candidate field on the Democratic side to face him. There's Jay Jones. He was a state delegate. He ran 4 years ago. And then there's Shannon Taylor. She is the Commonwealth's attorney up in Henrico. So in the money chase, you would expect that Miyares would be doing well. He's raised about $3.4 million so far. Jones is about half that at 1.8, and then Taylor's raised about $1 million. Most of the Democratic endorsements in this race seem to be going in Jones's direction, including former governors Terry McAuliffe and Ralph Northam. And again, this is another race where public polling really has not given us much of anything to work with. So we're just going to have to wait and see how people vote in June. We're talking again about 60% undecideds in some of these surveys. So there's just very, very little that you can draw from it. So like I mentioned, this is the only statewide race in either state that we're going to talk about today in which there is an incumbent running. So even if the Democrats win the governorship and the lieutenant governorship in Virginia, Miyares, as an incumbent attorney general here, he could hold on. It wouldn't really be that surprising either. Virginia in the past has had partisan splits in these offices. Like, for example, when Tim Kaine was the governor of Virginia, he had a Republican lieutenant governor and he had a Republican attorney general. Then you had Mark Warner as governor. He had Tim Kaine as his lieutenant governor, a Democrat, but then they had a Republican attorney general. So it does happen. And just generally speaking, with Trump targeting tens of thousands of federal workers in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and added to the fact that there is a growing perception out there that maybe Sears is not the best candidate that the GOP could have run here, I really do think that the Democrats are smelling some blood in the water. They've taken a lot of criticism for not really being up to the task and standing up to the Trump administration. But I do think that here in Virginia, at least on this level, they do think that they have a golden opportunity to take the governorship back. So I think they are going to go all in on this race as we draw closer to the fall and to the election. And then I think they're going to try to hope for a down ballot effect too, to try to sweep the board. All right, let's talk about New Jersey now. As I mentioned, New Jersey's primary is on June 10th. There's only one statewide race in New Jersey. That is for governor this year. As I mentioned previously, the lieutenant governor runs on a ticket. The attorney general, all of their statewide offices, those are appointees. So the governorship is the only thing that's being elected at the state level. Of course, you've got legislative races in New Jersey as well. Now, unlike the primaries in Virginia, like the lieutenant governor Democratic primary in Virginia was the only one that looked like it was going to be a very competitive race. Well, in the race for New Jersey governor, with Governor Phil Murphy stepping aside because he's term limited, this is going to be a free-for-all. There are 6 Democrats and 5 Republicans running. Now, let's talk first about the Democrats. Starting with Ras Baraka, he's the mayor of Newark. You may have heard his name in the news recently because he protested an ICE facility in New Jersey and he got arrested. The charges were ultimately dropped, but that definitely got his name in the news as he is in the middle of a gubernatorial campaign. Next up is Steve Fulop. He's the mayor of Jersey City. And then you've got Josh Gottheimer. He's a congressman from northern New Jersey. His district is the 5th district. It runs basically in a strip across the entirety of the northern border of the state with New York, going from Fort Lee out to High Point. Then the next candidate, this is going to be an important name here, it's Mikey Sherrill. She's a congresswoman for the 11th district of New Jersey, which is the Morristown area, some pretty wealthy areas in the interior of northern New Jersey. And Sean Spiller, he is the mayor of Montclair, is in this race. And then finally, the state Senate president, Steve Sweeney, is also in the running. So in terms of what to expect out of these candidacies, we're already seeing it. Baraka's definitely a progressive. He's probably the most progressive candidate in this race. Whereas Sherrill and Gottheimer are more moderate. So you've got quite an array here. There's a little something for everybody in this race between moderate and progressive for sure. And you know what? There are some big names. You know, they got members of Congress. They got mayors of some of the biggest cities in the state, one of the most powerful men in the legislature. I mean, they've got really, really strong candidates in this field. Now, in terms of endorsements, obviously with this many candidates, this many prominent candidates, a lot of the endorsements have scattered, but you've got Abigail Spanberger from Virginia. She's backing her former colleague in the U.S. House, Mikey Sherrill, in this race for governor. Both, if things go well for them, both could get elected governor of their respective states on the same night in November. The thing is, Sherrill, unlike Spanberger, has to get out of a Democratic primary first. Now, speaking of the polling, Sherrill has led so far. There are still enough undecideds, you know, we're talking double digits, that could still make this race interesting at the end of the day. Whereas, you know, if you looked at the race for second place, that certainly looks a lot more even. There was a poll that I had seen recently in this race, which had Sherrill in like the mid to high 20s, and literally every other candidate was at around 11 or 12%, save for maybe one of them. So, yeah, quite the battle for second, but we'll see. There's only 2 weeks left if any of those other candidates can really challenge her for the nomination. But kind of like the lieutenant governor's race in Virginia, this is another one where 30% might be enough to win. And now let's look at the Republican side in alphabetical order. You have Justin Barbera. He is a general contractor. You've got John Bramnick. He is a state senator. He was a member of the assembly for a while. An interesting footnote about him is that he's an attorney, and he was actually voted the funniest lawyer in New Jersey. And you can look that up because it's on his website. And there actually is a website about it where you can see some of his stand-up routines. I think one of them I saw, he was in it with Joe Piscopo. So there you go. And then the name to look at here is the next one I'm going to talk about, Jack Ciattarelli. He was the nominee for governor of the GOP in 2021. He ran a relatively close race with Phil Murphy, all things considered. I think people expected Murphy to just blow him out of the water, and it was actually kind of close. It was a single-digit race. So he's running again. Then you've got Mario Kranjak. He is the former mayor of Englewood Cliffs, and Bill Spadea, who is a radio show host. Now, the last two candidates on this list, if you want to talk about conservatives, they are both very, very conservative. In fact, Mario Kranjak, his campaign slogan is "Make New Jersey Great Again," and believe me, it's not an accident. And he touts his quote-unquote Trumpiness. So that's what you have on that side. But then you have more moderate candidates like, for example, John Bramnick. So in terms of endorsements, yes, Donald Trump has weighed into this race. He has endorsed Jack Ciattarelli. He, I think, is a solid front runner in this race. There are still bound to be some undecideds, but I do think that it's Ciattarelli's to lose. So there you go. There's a look at the primaries coming up in June in both Virginia and New Jersey. And for more on the 2025 elections, you can go to electionyard.com, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and follow us on Blue Sky at electionyard.com.